Hey CMA buddies, let's today start with a topic that is net working capital determination. Now this net working capital concept may have a question in your exam for 7 to 8 marks. So you should be well prepared. One of the most easiest topics that you can actually be prepared with for the examination purpose. I'll cover some 3 questions, and I think that should be more than sufficient for you to understand the concept of net working capital determination, right? Now, before we move on to the questions, let's simply understand what exactly is net working capital. Now, every organization has some fixed assets, right? Now, these fixed assets can be what? They can be plant and machinery, they can be furniture and fixture, they can be even land. Now, these fixed assets itself are not sufficient for you to give any revenue, right? Now, for example, if organization simply has a car and it doesn't have the money to pour some petrol or some driver to run that car, in that case, obviously, it will not generate any kind of use for the organization, right? Similarly, if we need to produce certain goods, right, some products for that matter, in that case, it needs some amount of raw material, right? It may require some amount of labor, or it may require some kind of overheads, right? Now, for meeting all these expenses, we need certain amount, and that amount is basically called as working capital, right? Now, what happens is when you need this working capital, you will generally have something from your own business, right? But it's not possible to have this amount all the time readily available with you. So it's highly likely that you would borrow this money from other organization or some other financial institutions, right? Now, what are these financial institutions? They can be even banks, they can be even creditors, right? Similarly, when you are selling some goods to a person or to your end customer, some of them may actually buy it on cash, but everyone will not do that, right? If it's a B2B business, that is a business to business, it's highly likely that you will have debtors, right? Because they won't have cash readily available with them. Now, as you go and purchase some raw material, it's highly likely that you will tell the supplier of the raw material to give you certain credit period, right? Similarly, when you are selling something, then in that case, your debtors will also expect you to give some window or some kind of cushion for them to repay the amount back to you, right? Now, this entire chain wherein you get certain cushion to pay the money back, and the period which you will give to your debtors to receive the money, this all is a part of a structure which is called as an operating cycle, right? Now, this operating cycle period is something which we will calculate based on the monetary aspect, that is money wise. Now, simple example can be, for example, if you have cash, right? Now, this cash you will use for what? For purchasing of raw material. Now, if you have cash yourself, that's fine. But if you don't, then in that case, what you will do is you will borrow it from someone else, right? Now, for this raw material to get converted into cash again, that is, first raw material will go into work in progress, then it will go to where? It will go to being a finished good, then it will go to being realized from the debtors, and then again it will be converted into cash, right? So this entire process or this entire chain will take certain time, right? So you put in some cash for purchasing raw material. How? Through a loan or through borrowing the money from someone else. Then this will go to a process of work in progress, right? Similarly, then thereafter it will be converted into a finished goods. Then it will be again given to the customers who will be the debtors of the company, and finally then only you will realize it as cash. So this entire cycle will take some amount of time. So this time of you realizing the cash is called as an operating cycle. Now, for example, you say you take 10 days, you borrow money for 10 days for purchase of raw material. Now, again, this raw material will go into work in progress. That will take certain amount of time, say 10 days. This will again be converted into finished goods. That say again takes 10 days. Then this finished goods will be purchased by debtors, and they will take 10 more days again for you to repay them back. And once you get the money back, this entire structure, that is 10, 20, 30, 40, it will take around 50 days for you to receive the amount in return, right? Or for you to generate the revenue. So this entire cycle is basically called as a operating cycle or a networking cycle, right? Now, here in this video we would be looking as to how to calculate this amount, or how much time or how much amount you would be requiring for you to maintain an adequate net working capital, right? I hope you understand the concept. Okay, let's move on to the first question. Maybe questions would be much better way for you to understand this concept in a better way, right? Let's move to the question number 1. This is a question from your MTP, that is mock test paper from June 2024. Okay, the question says, the management of Camellia Limited has called for a statement showing the working capital needed for what? To finance a level of activity of 3 lakh units of output for year ended March 31st, 2024. The cost of structure for company's product for above mentioned activity level is detailed below. It says raw material cost per unit is 20, direct material is 5, overheads is 15, total cost, if you just add all these 20 plus 5 plus 15, that becomes 40. There's a profit component of 10 and the selling price is of 50 rupees, right? Okay, then the question says what? It says past trends indicate that the raw materials are held in stock on an average for 2 months, right? Working process 50% complete will approximately to half months production. Finished goods remain in warehouse on an average for 1 month. Supplier of material extend 1 month's credit. Supply of materials extend 1 month credit means here we are talking about the creditors, right? They are the supplier of the materials. And 2 months credit is normally allowed to debtors. So you yourself give how many months of credit? 2 months. A minimum cash balance of 25,000 is expected to be maintained. The production pattern is assumed to be even during the year, that is 12 months, right? What you're supposed to do? You're supposed to prepare a statement of working capital determination. Simply, if you know how do you calculate a working capital, this is something which you have studied in class 11th or 12th also. Working capital simply is what? This is current assets minus current liabilities, right? So this is how we would be computing our working capital determination. Let's start with the question right away. Okay, now how do you start? We start first with current assets. Okay, now what are the various current assets as far as a working capital determination is concerned? First you start with something called as raw material, right? You take this as raw material. Now you need to compute the working capital period or the amount as to how much capital you require for raw material. That is working capital required for raw material. Fine. Okay. Now please remember, whenever you're solving such kind of question, right? Please check the period that's given, whether it is in weeks or it is in months. If it is in weeks, you try and determine the value for 1 week. And if it is for months, then you try and determine the value for 1 month. So if you do it on a per week or a per month basis, then the solution becomes easier for you, right? There's no complication, right? Now, what is the total level of activity of units that you require? That is 3 lakhs units. So the total units you require is how much? 3 lakhs. And you can see here the production pattern is how production pattern is assumed to be even during the year, that is 12 months. So it is basically on a monthly basis. So ideally my units per month will be how much? It will be 3 lakhs divided by 12. Right, so if I simply divide 3 lakh by 12, it will be 25,000 units per month. Right, so I have the monthly figure with me. So every month I would be requiring 25,000 units and my entire calculation will be based on that. Right, so when I talk about the raw material it says, what is the cost of raw material? Raw material is 20 rupees. Fine. So how many units do I require per month? I just require 25,000 units. And the cost of raw material per unit is how much? 20 rupees. And you would see that it says past trends indicate that raw materials are held in stock on an average for 2 months, right? So I just simply multiply with this by 2 because my period of holding the raw materials will be 2 months. So that is the operating cycle for raw material, right? So 25,000 is the units per month I require. 20 rupees is the cost of the raw material. So 25,000 into 20 is the cost of raw material in total, and 2 months I require for holding those material. That is the operating cycle of the raw material. So if I simply multiply this, my value will come out to be rupees 10 lakhs. Right? Let's take it in the outer column. Let's move on to the next thing. First thing is raw material. The second one that I'm going to compute is work in progress. Right? So that is the sequence, right? First I compute for raw material, then I'll see how is my WIP works, right? Now WIP, you would see or you would know that WIP is the composite figure for all these three, that is raw material plus direct material plus overheads. So WIP is WIP is simply raw material plus direct material plus overheads, right? So what is my raw material? Raw material I already know. This is 25,000 units per month into 20, right? But let's look at the question. The second line of the question says work in process, that is WIP, 50% complete will approximately to half months production, right? So the time that I require for the operating cycle with respect to work in progress is how much? Is half a month, right? So this is half a month, that is 1 by 2, but it says 50% complete. So that means I'll take this as 50% only. So it is not for the entire production purpose, it's only for the 50% WIP. So when question categorically tells you that you need work in progress which is only 50% completed and that will take half month's production, so you will take raw material as 25,000 units, 20 rupees per unit is the cost, 50% completion, and half month is the period of operating cycle. So if you just simply multiply this, the figure that you get is 1,25,000. Similarly, you will do it for what? You will do it for direct labor. I think it should be labor, it should not be direct material because we've already taken material. This is how it was given in the question. Now when you take direct labor into consideration, then again you have to look at from labor's perspective. So 25,000 is the number of units, right? Price per unit for as far as labor is concerned is 5, right? You just need half month as far as the WIP is concerned, and the work in progress is basically 50% completed, right? So if you just simply calculate that, the value that you will get is 31250. Now the third thing that you need to look into is overheads, right? So when I talk about overheads, again, how many units do you have? 25,000 per month. What is the cost as far as the overheads is concerned? It is rupees 15. You need half month as far as the operating cycle for WIP is concerned, and it accounts for 50% completion. So if you just multiply all these figures, the value that you get is 93,750, right? So just total this up. If you just total all these three, the value that you get is 2,50,000 rupees, right? Moving on to the next, first one is raw material, second one is WIP. The third one that we will have after raw material WIP, then it will be finished goods, right? Okay, now as far as finished good is concerned, again, how many units you have? You have 25,000. Okay, finished goods, you will take all these three into account, that is raw material plus direct material plus overhead, that is 20 plus 5 plus 15, that is 40. So you can take this as 40. Okay, it's okay if you take finished goods as 50 also, there's no problem in it, because finished good can also have profit component into consideration. Ideally you should take it at cost. Ideally you should take it at cost, because whenever we are talking about net working capital determination, it's basically how much money is involved from the company's perspective, right? So generally we don't take profit thing into consideration. So ideally this is called as cash cost of production. So when you talk about cash cost of production, then cash cost is only up to 40. So rather I would go for 40, but if you are taking 50, that is also fine. but I would suggest you to take only 40 unless and until question specifies that. Please make a note at the end of your answer stating that you have considered only the cash cost of production and not as per the selling price, right? Okay, so I am taking cash cost of production, then this can be finished good, that is 25,000 into 40, right? Is there any condition given as far as the finished good is concerned? Yes, it is. It says finished goods remain in warehouse on an average for 1 month, right? So 25,000 is for per month, 40 is the cost, and it is only for 1 month, right? So in that case, if you just simply multiply, the value that you get is rupees 10 lakhs. Take this to outer column, that is 10 lakh rupees here. Fine. Okay, what is the next thing? Next thing that you have is debtors. Why debtors? Because question categorically tells you that finished goods remain in warehouse on average for 1 month. Suppliers of material extend 1 month credit. Suppliers means creditor. Now similarly you can see here it says 2 months credit is normally allowed to debtors. So as far as the debtors are concerned, you give credit for a period of 2 months, right? So in that case what you should do, 25,000 is the cost, is the number of units. You again take this as 40. Okay, you can take even 50 as I said. You can even take the selling price, but ideally as far as the net working capital is concerned, we assume it to be a cost only. That is something which we need to recover. That is the amount that is involved in the cycle, right? Hence I would go for total cost and not for the selling price. It's okay if you take selling price also, but in that case please make a note. Please make sure more often than not, unless and until the question specifies, it's better to go for a cost only and not the selling price. So 25,000 into 40, but here the value I will take is 2, right? Why 2? Because it clearly says that 2 months credit is normally allowed to debtors, right? So 25,000 into 40 into 2 is how much? This will add up to 20 lakhs. So again this I'll take to the outer column. Is there anything else in the asset side that I have? Okay, finally it says a minimum cash balance of rupees 25,000 is expected to be maintained. Now again we know that cash is what? Cash is basically our current assets. So here I'll take as cash and this amount is 25,000. So now I simply add all of this, that is raw material, WIP, finished goods, debtors and my cash, and the amount comes to be 42 lakhs 75,000. Let's come to current liabilities now. What are the current liabilities that I have? Here current liabilities I can see only one, that is suppliers of material extend 1 month's credit. So you would have purchased the raw material from a supplier, and the supplier is basically giving you a cushion or a window of 1 month for you to repay them back, right? So what is the cost of raw material? Cost of raw material is rupees 20. Rather I would take there as creditors. How many units am I talking about? I'm talking about 25,000 units per month. Okay, what is the cost of raw material that I have? The cost of raw material I have is 20 rupees. And suppliers extend me a credit of 1 month. Yes, here you can see that suppliers of material extend 1 month credit, right? So if I simply multiply this, the value that I get is 5 lakh rupees. As I know, the formula for what? For net working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. So simply if I subtract A, that is my current assets, from my current liabilities, the value that I get is 37 lakh 75,000. That's it. That's how you calculate a net working capital. Determining how much net working capital is basically required by the company for running its operations smoothly, right? Okay, let's move on to the next question. The next question says, from the following information, you are required to estimate the net working capital requirement, right? Okay, here the details are given to you. Raw material is given as 40 rupees, direct labor is given as 50, overheads excluding depreciation is 30, and the total cost, if you add all these three, you get 85, right? Then it says selling price is 100 rupees per unit. Here the output is 52,000 units per annum, right? Please make sure, have a look at what exactly the question is saying. It's saying on a per annum basis. So 52,000 is the requirement for the whole year. Now raw material in stock is how much? It is average 4 weeks. In the last question we were doing it on a monthly basis. Now this is talking on weekly basis, right? Work in progress, again it says assume 50% completion stage with full material consumption, that is average 2 weeks. Finished goods in stock is average 4 weeks. Credit allowed by suppliers is average 4 weeks. Credit allowed to debtors is 8 weeks. And cash at bank is expected to be 50,000 rupees. Assume that production is sustained at an even pace during the 52 weeks of the year. All sales are on credit basis. So whatever sales you are making, it's on a credit basis. There's no cash component involved. State any assumption that you might have made while computing, right? This is a question that was asked in December 2023 exam, right? Okay, now the first thing that we need to do is we need to compute the units either on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. Here we can see that the question categorically states that that the production is sustained at an even pace during the 52 weeks of the year, and the window that we get for operating cycle, it's all on a weekly basis. So it's good that we calculate the units on a per week basis, right? Now the output for the whole year or the per annum is 52,000 units per annum. That's there in the question already given. You just simply divide this by what? You divide it by the number of weeks. So you divide this by 52. Hence you get 1000 units per week. Now the question becomes easy for you. So whatever units you have, you simply multiply with the average and you would get the period of operating cycle, right? Okay. So let's start with the question right away. Same thing. We'll start with the current assets first. Okay. So when you talk about current assets, what is the first thing? First thing you talk about is raw material. Okay. Now how much is the raw material? Now raw material, you know how much you require. You require 1000 units per week. What is the cost per unit? Cost per unit is rupees 40. And what is the operating cycle period? Raw material in stock is for 4 weeks. So you simply multiply this by 4. Please don't do it by 4 by 52 because I've already calculated for per week basis. So this we need for 4 weeks. So we simply multiply this by 4. So 1000 into 4 into 40 is how much? This will make 1,60,000 rupees. Moving on to the next one. Next one is what? We'll go to WIP. That is work in progress. Now work in progress, we have already discussed. This will be inclusive of what? This will be inclusive of everything. That is full material consumption. Okay, work in progress, it says assume 50% completion stage with full material consumption. Full material consumption. That means the raw material that you would be using, that will be 100%, right? Because it says full material consumption, right? So raw material is basically 100%, but the direct labor and the direct overhead, which is again a part of WIP, this will be how much? We have to assume only 50% completion stage. So this will be only 50%. I hope you understand, right? Let's read it once again. It says, as far as the work in progress is concerned, it says assume 50% completion stage with full material consumption. Full material consumption means what? Material will be utilized 100%, whereas the other two components, that is the direct labor and the overheads, that will be used 50% each, because actually work in progress is only 50% completion stage, but full material consumption is there. Hence raw material is 100%, whereas your WIP is only 50%, right? I hope you understand. Now let's move on to the WIP. In WIP again, the first thing that you start with is raw material. What is the number of units that you have? This is 1000. What is the price per unit? The price per unit is 40. And what is the operating cycle as far as WIP is concerned? As far as WIP is concerned, it is 2 weeks, right? So 1000 into 40 into 2. So this will make up to 80,000 rupees. Please make sure this raw material is written in the outer column. Okay, what is the next thing? After raw material, what is the other thing that we have? We have direct labor. Okay, let's come to direct labor. Now direct labor, again you will have only 1000 units. Okay, what is the price as far as direct labor is concerned? It is rupees 15. We already know the working cycle is 2, But here you have to make sure, as far as the direct labor is concerned, it says assume 50% completion stage. So when it says 50% completion stage other than full raw material, then you have to take this as 50%, or you can even take 1/2, just one and the same. Fine, I hope you understand this. So 1000 into 15, that is the price, the operating cycle period. Because WIP other than raw material is 50% completion stage only, hence I'll take direct labor as 50% and the value will turn out to be 15,000 rupees. Finally, you talk about the overheads. Now what is the price of overheads? Overheads, please ignore this excluding depreciation. Anyways, it's excluding depreciation only. So hence it is rupees 30. So what is the consumption or the units per week? That is 1000 into the price is how much? The price is 30 rupees. The operating cycle is 2. Again, you have to take this as 50%. Because only for material it is 100%. For all the other aspects, you have to consider only 50% completion as far as WIP is concerned. So just simply calculate this. The value that you get is 30,000 rupees. Totaling this up, you get this as 1,25,000. Right? Finally, we come to what? Third stage is finished goods. Raw material, WIP and finished goods. Okay, what does it talk about finished goods? Finished goods, again, you can take either of them. You can take the selling price or the total cost, but we generally rely on total cost of production. So I am taking this as 85. If you take it as 100, please make sure you make a note of that. 85 is something which normally is considered. There's nothing wrong in taking 85 as such. So as far as finished good is concerned, you have 1000 units per week, right? The cost that you take is 85 rupees. Okay. What is the operating cycle period for it? As far as finished goods in stock is concerned, it says average 4 weeks. So hence you multiply this simply with 4. So we just calculate this. The value that you get is 3,40,000. Just take this to the outer column. Next we come to what? We come to something called as debtors. The question categorically tells you that all the sales are on credit basis. So whatever sales you are making, it's credit. So your entire sales has been made to debtors only, right? So in that case, what is the period that you have? It is 8 weeks, right? Now again, as far as the debtors is concerned, you can take even the cash cost of production, or you can take the sales value. You rather take 85, that is the cash cost of production, and you just simply multiply this by the operating cycle period, that is 8. Here the value that you get is 6,80,000. You again take this to the outer column. Finally, you come to cash component. Do you have any cash in this question? Yes, it says cash at bank is expected to be rupees 50,000. Simply adding 50,000 here, you get the value of what? You get the value of current assets. How much is the current assets? If you just add all these three, that is 160 plus 125 plus 340 plus 680 plus 50, the value that you get is 13,55,000 rupees. Come to current liabilities now. Current liabilities, what do we have? The current liabilities, one we can see is credit allowed by the suppliers. Suppliers are the creditors. They have given us 4 weeks of period, right? So what is the thing that we purchase from suppliers? That has to be simply raw material and nothing else. So simply you take creditors as how much? Creditors is the number of units. The number of units per week is how much? 1000 rupees. You take the cost of raw material, that is 40. And suppliers give us credit of how many weeks? They give us credit of 4 weeks. Simply multiply this by 4. So if you just value 1000 into 40 into 4 is how much? This is 1,60,000. Simply calculate the net working capital. The net working capital is simply 13,55,000 minus 1,60,000. Hence my value should be how much? It should be 11,95,000. I hope you understand this question. Let's move on to the next one. This is slightly different but very important because it has a small variation from what we have been doing before, right? Let's look at the question first. It says the following annual figures relate to XYZ company, right? First of all, sales is given and it says sales are made at 2 months credit and the amount is 36 lakhs, right? Materials consumed, that is raw material. Suppliers extend 2 months credit. That means creditors have given us how much period? 2 months. Amount is 9 lakhs. Wages is paid, but wages it says 1 month lag in payment. 1 month lag in payment means you are making 1 month payment after the services are rendered. Hence the wages paid is basically outstanding. Lag in payment means what? Services are already done, but you are making payment 1 month later. So that is outstanding for you. Then it says cash manufacturing expenses. There are certain expenses that is being incurred as far as the manufacturing is concerned. So expenses are paid at 1 month in arrear, right? So arrear means again it is outstanding. Arrears, you pay something on a later date, so that is cash manufacturing expenses basically in arrear. Is an arrear payment, or rather you can say it's an outstanding payment. Administrative expenses, 1 month lag in payment, again this is outstanding. And it says sales promotion expenses, it is paid quarterly in advance. Advance is nothing but it is basically a prepaid. So these all three becomes what? They becomes your current liability. Whereas when it is a prepaid, that becomes your current assets. I'm sorry. Then the question says, company sells its product on a gross profit of 25%. Depreciation is considered as a part of the cost of production. It keeps 1 month's stock each of raw material. So for raw material, you have 1 month window, and finished goods and cash balance keep 1 month stock of each of raw materials and finished goods. So for raw material and finished goods, both the period is how much? It is 1 month, and cash balance is therefore 1 lakh. Now question says, assume a 20% safety margin, right? So whenever you're computing the net working capital, there is a 20% margin that you need to maintain. That's what question says. Compute the working capital requirements of the company on cash cost basis, right? Cash cost basis, I have already discussed. In this question, you're not supposed to consider the sale value. So here categorically you will not take sale value. Here you have to take everything on a cash cost basis, right? So that means what? Here you can see when you take the sales, right? The sales is what? Sales is basically 36 lakhs rupees, right? But the sales will be inclusive of the profit also, right? So what you are supposed to do? You are supposed to take only the consumption or the operating cycle based on cash cost basis. Ignore the work in progress. So there is no WIP. We need not worry about WIP. Okay. Before starting the question, let's understand certain aspects of this. First of all, you don't have units given, right? So here there is no question of you doing on a monthly basis or a weekly basis. You have to calculate based on the amount that's given to you, right? Okay. Secondly, the question categorically states you have to do it on a cash cost basis, right? So let's understand how do you do it on a cash cost basis. Okay. Now when you talk about the cash cost basis, you would see there's something called as material consumed. Okay. Now we'll start doing the question, and when whatever is required, we'll do working notes as and when required, right? Okay. Let's start with the current assets first. Now current assets, the first one is what? It is raw material. Okay. Now as far as the raw material is concerned, it says materials consumed is how much? It is 9 lakh. Fine. No doubt in this. So we simply take 9 lakh rupees. Please remember, we don't have units. This is all given in amount, right? So we have to calculate based on the amount only. We cannot bifurcate into units and then we can compute. We simply have to take the material consumed, that is 9 lakhs. Okay. Now it says it keeps 1 month stock each of raw material. So that means what? We have 1 month of 1 month. Here you have to divide by 12, right? Because this is amount, this is not units. This 9 lakhs is amount, not units. Please don't get confused. Hence the calculation that we would do as far as the operating cycle is concerned, we have to do it on a monthly basis. So hence it is 9 lakh into 1 by 12. Simply computing, you will get this as 75,000. Okay. Question then says, ignore work in progress process. That's the last thing. So second one is what? WIP, which we generally generally calculate, but it says you need not take into consideration. Hence this becomes nil. Then we come to finished goods. Okay, now finished goods, we know that the period or the operating cycle period that we have is that of 1 month, right, into 1 by 12. But here in question we can see there's nowhere we are given the finished goods price, right? So for that we have to first compute the total cash cost of production. See, in the previous questions what happened was we were given raw material, we were given direct labor, we were given overheads. We simply used to add it, we used to multiply with that the number of units, and it was easy for us to compute the finished goods. Here the finished goods is not given to us, right? Here we need to calculate the amount. How would we do that? Now you got to compute the total cash cost of production. What is total cash cost of production? Total cash cost of production will include what all? First of all, it will include raw material. Yes or no? What is the figure for raw material? It is 9 lakh rupees. Yes? Okay. Then you have something called as wages paid. What is the wages? Wages is nothing but this is direct labor. Yes or no? So when you talk about direct labor, how much is the amount? It is 7,20,000 rupees. Okay. And then you can see there are 3 expenses that are given. One is cash manufacturing expenses, one is administrative expenses, and one is sales promotion expenses. Okay. Please think logically. If we have to compute the value for what? For finished goods. Now finished goods will have what? Finished goods will have raw material, it will have wages, and it will have manufacturing expenses. Yes or no? Yes or no? See, when we are producing something, there will be a certain manufacturing expense that will be involved, right? But administrative and sales promotion expenses are not a part of the finished good. It will be considered only when you are going to sell the product. Yes or no? So the cash cost of production will include only raw material, wages, and cash manufacturing expenses. So here I'll take cash manufacturing expenses, and the cash manufacturing expenses is how much? This is 9,60,000. Simply adding this, the value that I get is 6, 8, 16 and 9, 25. This will be 25,80,000. Now this is the value of my finished good. Right? Yes or no? See, what is the value of my finished good usually? It is direct labor plus raw material plus overheads. Right? Here the breakup is not given. Here the question simply says what is the value of material consumed. Material consumed is what? Raw material. Wages paid is what? Direct labor. And there is a manufacturing expense. Manufacturing expense is nothing but you can take it as overheads only. Right? So if you just add all these 3, you get the total value of finished goods. So that is 25,80,000. Hence the total value of finished goods is how much? 25,80,000. You know there is a 1 month of operating cycle period that I have. So 25,80,000 into 1 by 12. If I just calculate this, the value I get is 2,15,000. Okay. Moving on. The next thing that I need to calculate is what? Debtors. Okay. Now again, if you remember, the question says you got to compute on the cash cost basis, right? It is on cash cost basis. So that means you cannot take the sales value. If the other question, that's why I told you whenever you're solving any question, please take it on a cash cost basis and not on a sales value. If you do consider sales value, please do make a note of it, because ideally whenever we are determining the operating cycle, we assume that whenever our actual cost will be realized, the overall cycle of the operating cycle is done. So we generally don't take it on a sales figure. But if at all you are taking in a sales figure, then you make a note of it. Now in this question you cannot take sales figure, because question clearly tells you that the company is basically computing the working capital only on cash cost basis. Cash cost. So what is the cost? That is what you have to take into consideration. So this 36 lakhs cannot be considered. Okay. Then what I need to do is I need to compute what? Total cash cost of sales. Right? Because if I compute total cash cost of sales, then only I would be able to know my debtors value. Make sense? See, I need to consider cash cost. Cash cost of what? Of sales. Why sales? Because if I compute the total cost of sales, then only I would be able to know what? I would be able to know my debtors value. Right? Here the sales that is given is basically 36 lakhs. This sales, if generally given, it is assumed that the 25% is already included in this. So let's not take that into consideration. Let's compute cash cost of sales on our own. Okay. Now how do you compute the cash cost of sales? First of all, you take the price of the finished goods, right? Or this finished goods is what? Let's take it as A, right? Let's not take it as, consider as finished goods. Let's consider this as total cash cost of production, right? Let's consider this as A. This is the value of A that I have. I'm just mentioning this as A to be 25,80,000. This is actually finished goods only, but this is for reference purpose. I'm taking this as A, that is total cash cost of production. So what is the cost of production that I had to incur? That was 25,80,000. Now after that, if I'm making sales, so before making sales, there are certain other expenses that I would incur. So what are these expenses that is mentioned in the question? One expense is administrative expense, and the second one is sales promotion expense. Yes or no? These are the expenses which would help me to realize the sales. So hence, these would be the part of the sales. So the two other things that I am going to add here is, one is admin expenses. How much is the admin expense? Admin expense is basically 2,40,000. And I would also consider the sales promotion expenses. How much is the sales promotion expenses? Sales promotion expenses is basically 1,20,000. So if I just total this up, 25,80,000 plus 2,40,000 plus 1,20,000, I'll get value as 29,40,000. This 20,40,000 is what? This is the total cash cost of sales. Since I've computed the cash cost of sales, now the debtors will be calculated on the basis of total cash cost of sales. That is 29,40,000. And what is the period of operating cycle for debtors? Here operating cycle for debtors is 2 months. Why 2 months? Because it says that sales are given at 2 months credit. So you multiply this by 2 by 12. I hope you understand this, right? So if you just calculate, you get value as 4,90,000. And the last one is what? Generally we have cash. Let's have a look at the question whether there is any cash component in this. Yes, it says there is a cash balance of rupees 1 lakh. So you simply add 1 lakh into this. So if you just add all these, you get value of current assets. So the value of current assets 75,000 plus 2,15,000 plus 4,90,000. I'm sorry, this is 4,90,000. And then you have 1 lakh. Okay, I forgot one more thing. Just before we compute this, if you remember in the question, it directly told us that sales promotion expense is basically paid quarterly in advance. So that means it's a prepaid expense. Something which is prepaid has to be our current assets, right? So if it is paid quarterly in advance, then in that case, you will take sales promotion expenses under the current assets. So when I talk about the sales promotion expenses, how much is the amount? It is 1,20,000. 1,20,000. And since it says quarterly in advance, I am supposed to multiply this by 3 by 12. By 3, because how many quarters does a year have? It has 4 quarters, right? So per quarter it is 3 by 12, right? So 1,20,000 into 3 by 12 is how much? Oh, just a minute. Yes, so this should be 3 by 12. So if I just multiply this by 3 by 12, the value that I get is 30,000. Now I have the value for current assets. So we just simply add all these components. The value that I get is 9,10,000. Fine. Okay. Now moving on to where? Moving on to the current liabilities. Okay, let's start with the first one, that is basically the creditors. Okay, now what does it tell you? It says that sales material consumed, suppliers extend 2 months credit. So creditors basically give me how much period? Creditors basically give me a period of 2 months. So it becomes 2 by 12. What is the value of raw materials that I have? The value of raw material is 9 lakh. So 9 lakhs into 2 by 12, the value that I get is 1,50,000. Right? Is there anything that is outstanding for me? Yes, there are three components that are outstanding. Outstanding things are considered as current liabilities. Right? So first one is wages paid. You pay wages, 1 month lag in payment. Right? What is the value? 7,20,000. So when I talk about wages, it's simply 7,20,000 into 1 by 12. Here the value that I get is 60,000 rupees. Then I have cash manufacturing expenses. Yes, the cash manufacturing expenses is how much? Expenses are paid 1 month in arrear, right? So this is outstanding for 9,60,000. So this becomes 9,60,000 into 1 by 12. So the value that I get is 80,000. And then I have administrative expenses, which is again 1 month lag in payment for 2,40,000. Right? So this is what? This is administrative expenses. Since it is outstanding, it becomes a current liability. So that becomes 2,40,000 into 1 by 12. Right? 2,40,000 into 1 by 12. So that means the value that I get here is 20,000. So simply adding the current liabilities, the value that I get is how much? 150 plus 60 plus 80 plus 20, that becomes 3,10,000. So my working capital is how much? Working capital that I require is 9,10,000 minus 3,10,000, that is 6 lakhs. Please make sure you read the question in thoroughly, because question is not over yet. It says, assuming a 20% safety margin, compute the working capital requirement. So I have to take 20% safety margin also. So if I compute the safety margin, that means I need to have some extra cash as far as the working capital is concerned. Company assumes that they may be requiring some safety margin for them to run the business smoothly. So safety margin is how much? 6 lakhs and 20% of that. So that becomes how much? 1,20,000. The safety margin is supposed to be added. Yes, because the working capital that we require is 6 lakhs, but they say you take 1,20,000 of safety margin more. Hence, the working capital I need, or the net working capital that is required, is 7,20,000. Right? I hope you understand this question. Right? With this we finish net working capital determination. Please have a look at all these three questions thoroughly. I think that should be more than sufficient for you to understand. Still, if there is any doubt, you can write me on the comment section and I can solve some more questions. If you really feel, please do comment. Right? I hope you like this video. If you did, then please make sure you you press the like button, you do share with your friends, and do subscribe to our channel. Thank you, and keep learning.